everybody, and welcome to the Supercars Exchange podcast. As always, I'm joined by Shane. How you going, Shane?
Mate, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Had a great weekend at the Supercars because this is my home round. So it got a little bit intense up in race control at some points, but it was great to be up there and great to be away from the rain. I felt sorry for all of the volunteers that were down doing flags in the rain. Some were saying that they were like ankle deep in water because it was pooling in some
Wow.
points. So it wasn't great conditions for some of them out there, but they all did a great job. But yeah, obviously rain was the big topic of the weekend because I was predicting there was going to be no rain because the prediction at that time was no rain. And then the rain came on the Friday and it threw the whole weekend up into the air and it gave us the best weekend we've had all season.
Yeah, that's right. We've never had a wet session in Townsville before. I don't think, let alone wet racing. It's in the dry season up there like that. It used to be my hometown once upon a time. And it rains during the wet season and doesn't rain during the dry season. It's usually one or the other. And all of a sudden, we had a little bit of sprinkling on Friday, and then Saturday was a little bit more at times, even though we had a dry race on Saturday. But then Sunday, wow, it just changed everything.
Yeah, the Sunday race it was raining, but obviously it was like raining beforehand a bit. And I was in race control, and it was like midway through the race, and it was starting to finally dry up a bit. And I looked at the radar on my phone because not much was happening. Looked at the radar on my phone, and I'm like, oh, there is more coming.
Yeah.
And if you know what Townsville's kind of like, it's like Magnetic Island to the east, and kind of like the Castle Hill sort of to the east of the circuit as well. And it just came flying in over the top of Maggie and went straight over Castle Hill, and you can see it coming. All of a sudden, Castle Hill just disappeared, and then all the rain just came onto the circuit. And I'm like, yep, this is gonna get interesting now, and it sure did.
That's it. It was one of those. It was certainly not Gold Coast spec levels of rain from last year, but it was definitely enough to make it interesting. And what was still good was that we still kept green flag running throughout that time. We didn't see the safety car come out to pull the guys up from putting themselves into the wall. So it was still really good to see that. And strangely enough, like watching the Super 2 race on beforehand, that every shot of the pits was one of the drivers watching the TV because they want to see what's happening out on track, to see where there's grip, where there's not. So I don't think they've ever seen so many supercars drivers watching the younger guys go around trying to learn what they can from them. So it was definitely an entertaining race.
It's also interesting because like the way that the roads are built up here, they're very dense. And they kind of just hold the water on the top. Not so much around the permanent area, but like down Boundary Street and then onto Charters Towers / Flinders Street. It pooled massively around all there. And obviously, in Townsville, along Boundary Street on the main street there, they've got the massive white painted lines for the islands there. And they didn't paint over most of them. They really only painted over like the exit white lines. But along the straight, you could hear the car's wheel spinning all the way past race control. They just couldn't get any grip basically the whole time because it's just on the white lines. And also that actual road surface is like the very slick one. There's really not much grip, and the water just sits on top of it. So I was really impressed that some drivers, they were still running the slicks when it was like that. But obviously, when it really started to come down, everyone jumped into the pit lane. But before we get too much into the Sunday race, which is obviously the most exciting one, we had the race on Saturday, and it was until the Sunday race, it was the best race of the season. It was awesome to see. Even though McLaughlin still won it, it was some great battles up and down the field.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We, particularly the battle towards the front. It didn't take long. We had Reynolds on pole, which was a big shock. I think a lot of people had McLaughlin to start on pole, as he tends to do. But we didn't. Not only had Reynolds starting in front of him, we had Mostert as well. So we had McLaughlin starting on the second row, which, if you had to put money on McLaughlin finishing off the front row for qualifying, you'd probably take home a decent bit of money for the weekend. But, it was a good start for all the drivers. But because of the fighting back and forth between Mostert and particularly McLaughlin, Reynolds just skipped away, and he had like a 6-second lead at one stage. And But yeah, it was definitely like those opening few laps, the exchanges between McLaughlin and Mostert were just incredible. McLaughlin would get past, Chaz would pass him straight back. Took actually quite a while for McLaughlin to actually finally make his way past.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, especially, well, Townsville's really quite a tight, twisty circuit. Only really like the main straight in corner one that has any kind of like wider sections. So I think McLaughlin kind of had the pace over him, but he was obviously just getting held up with that battle with Mostert. Unfortunately, just Reynolds came undone with that wheel nut again in the pit lane. It's just so unfortunate. We said that last time that someone from Penrite might be losing their jobs, and it appears they haven't lost their job yet because they're still having that issue.
They just put him on a different wheel thinking that would change it. It didn't do anything. Like he was having a decent race. I don't know if he would have had the pace to win in the end, because even in that second stint, he just went backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
He was just losing a bit of time over Whincup, who had a storming start, made the strategy call early to come in, get onto some fresh tyres, and lighter fuel, definitely as well. But he managed to make up a lot of ground, and but McLaughlin was doing the same, and Reynolds, unfortunately for him, started to go backwards a little bit. Then they had their pit issue, which it's almost becoming like every race weekend now that we're starting to see issues from them. So one of the team managers said that they were told from their team personnel that it might have been equipment or issues with the equipment, so they went out and bought all new equipment, and it's still happening. So I think he's firmly passed the buck straight onto the pit crew for making those mistakes. So it's in a way, look, it's good to see. Like he's like, okay, that's the problem. They made the mistake. We've got to deal with that now. But at the same time, too, chucking the crew members under the bus is a bit harsh at the same time too. So at the end of the day, you're supposed to win and lose as a team.
Yeah.
So who knows?
I think obviously these guys do practices from like 7 a.m. in the morning. You hear them doing it constantly, just going up and down.
Yeah.
And they do the practices back at the workshops. So obviously they're very well-oiled machine, but it's probably just like performance stress more than likely that's occurring here. It's just so you go.
Oh no, I was just going to say that Mark Scape actually made a good point, which is rare, but he made a good point. Like,
true,
because it was in the fuel stop. You covered by fuel.
Yeah.
And, well, you see Red Bull and DJR and a few of the other teams. Like the wheel changes are so slow. They're just making sure they get it right because they know they've got 15 seconds of fuel to put in. So they've got 15 seconds to slowly put a tyre on if they need to. Where these guys, you could see that he's still trying to get it on and off as quick as he could. Then they had the issue, and then that might be where at least in those longer pit stops that are covered by fuel, they just need to slow down a bit, and get the tyre on or off and then on again. Like
kind of brief beforehand, say you have this 15 seconds to do it. Just make sure you get it on, you get it off, you get it on. It's there, and you have. Like, obviously, it's difficult to do that. They're like 20-kilogram wheels, and you're lifting them right up. Like, I take 30 seconds just to change one wheel on my car. But it's just you just need to make sure that they're getting it in there. But because it's unfortunate, because Reynolds could have performed a lot better.
Well, that's it. He still had a chance of a victory. Podium was still probably the biggest chance for him, but. Yeah, it took that away, and he ended up finishing 6th.
Another performer that I thought went well, and he did pretty well over the weekend, was Holdsworth, and he unfortunately dropped a few positions after the beginning of the race, but he still did pretty well. And also Percat has performed really well. Also BJR in general, like we were saying in our previous podcast. Actually, I have a story. I got to say g'day to Brad Jones on the Sunday as he was walking back to his car. I told him how unfortunate the incident was, obviously, with the fire. But I tried to uplift him, saying it's awesome to see his team performing. So we've passed on our regards to him in that sense.
That's it. Should have hit him up for a quick interview.
Oh, I was considering it, but he seemed a little bit dejected, so I thought maybe not.
The airport was the next stop for him. He was ready to go home.
The bar at the airport.
Yeah, that's right.
Specifically.
Yeah, that's it. But Percat, he had it was just another good, consistent race. Well, we've seen it from him when we're going through their scores for the half season, report card. We gave him a good score because he's doing these sorts of things during races. So he's staying out of trouble. He's just chipping away at the numbers, and he's finishing in the top 10 quite a bit this season. And Holdsworth had a bit of an ordinary start, and for a while was running way down. I thought, oh well, that's Holdsworth might have gone a little bit back to where he was, but he did battle his way back and managed to round out the top 10. But I think for me, Fabian Coulthard, he showed really good pace as well. He started outside the 10 as he didn't have a good qualifying, and then just again a little bit like Percat, but obviously better car speed, just chipped away at it. Was taking care of the overtakes, staying out of trouble, and then managed to come home in 5th.
So also the Red Bull cars performed well. Whincup jumped up 4 positions. Shane Van Gisbergen stayed in his qualifying 4th. So Whincup's just gone straight out and around Van Gisbergen and gone flying up the field.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think Whincup, we touched on it before. He made the call to come in early and change tyres. A little bit of strategy played its part there.
It's interesting that Van Gisbergen didn't try a similar strategy, despite the fact that you could see that Whincup had got that undercut. And then they just left Van Gisbergen on that same strategy.
Yeah, I think because we've seen it so many times. Van Gisbergen, he's best at he doesn't care if he has to try and get the undercut. He'll come out behind someone, but they'll fill him full of fuel. He'll run longer in the second stint, come out at the end on fresh tyres. Obviously a lot lighter fuel. They only have to fuel him up for the last 20 laps or so. A lot of the races, and he's just because he's got better tyre life. He's able to storm through the field, and particularly if there's always that chance, especially at Townsville, of that late race safety car. We didn't get it. He ended up staying out and out and out and out, and laps were ticking by, thinking, is he coming in? And eventually he did, but it was he'd managed to creep up through the field a little bit because he was lower down in the top 10, but he passed Coulthard with a lap to go and brought the car home in 5th, which is that's his best result for quite a long time. So overall, as a team result, that was
came 4th, I think.
A good result. 4th, was it?
Yeah,
sorry, 4th. Yeah, Coulthard was 5th. Sorry, yes. It was best team result for them for a long time. Yeah,
to see them back up, both of them back up in the 5, it's good to see. But going back to the other end of the field, I just thought I'd like to chuck in a little bit of a cheeky that Michael Caruso came in 22nd. So, performing better than what Stanaway does, usually.
Yeah, that's it. He
came from last to 22nd, actually. So
yeah, that's it. So he's climbed up a few spots, but he was given the opportunity. And I found out why we didn't see Chris Pither in there, because the rule states that if he'd done this round, he's no longer eligible for co-driver status for the Enduros. Because I thought he's doing a good job. Why would you want to change that?
That's
and then
fair.
I did find out that it's because of that rule of, obviously you're only allowed to do a couple of rounds before you're no longer qualified to be a co-driver.
That's
I
interesting.
thought there would have been a bit of dispensation as a reserve driver, but I could probably still go with it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Maybe they just put Pither in as the full-time driver and just put Stanaway as a co-driver.
That's it. Well, there had been a couple of I did read a couple of stories about whether or not Stanaway would come back, because I think he's desperate to, but ultimately he's got to get clearance for his neck and his back and that. So whether he does come back right away is another thing as well. They might have to recruit one of the Super 2 drivers to come up and fill his spot in for the rest or for a few more races yet.
And also, Caruso, best performance for the 33 this season, I think. It came 9th on the Sunday race. He came 9th.
Yeah,
it was a crazy race, but he still managed to get a 9th in there, beating out obviously McLaughlin because of the incident at the beginning. But there's some big names that he beat out that
Yeah,
just
that's
weren't
it.
anywhere in that race. Obviously, it's crazy, but he kept his head cool and he managed that ninth position. So that's going to be quite a few points, and he might be up there in the championship now.
Yeah, that's it. Like I think he'll be like he's showing that he still deserves a place on the grid.
Mm,
You can see that even at Nissan, he was definitely finishing well in there. I think he was outperforming the car for
yes,
a lot of the time he was there. So he only missed out on this drive because he didn't have, well, wasn't
the
able to get a
sponsor.
sponsorship
Yeah,
package together. So no fault of his own. And there was, by the time that decision was made, there was no other spots on the grid for him.
mm,
So, but Tickford were pretty quick to sign him up as one of their endurance drivers, which of course you're going to want to take, and you're going to have a pretty competitive car too.
yeah.
So
I was
you've
about
got a
to
shot
say.
at a Bathurst victory. And then now he's had the door open up to fill in around here, and he's done well. He got a top 10, like what we said about Percat and that before. You just, particularly on a wet race like that, all you have to do is not stuff up, and you're
Yeah,
probably going to finish well,
exactly.
because so many drivers are going to have bonehead moments and do something a little bit crazy, and then you just take advantage of their stupidity. And one, well, I wouldn't say it was stupidity, but we'll probably touch on that one very shortly.
I was about to
Uh,
stay thinking of not keeping your head cool. The flap one incident
yeah,
on the
that's
Sunday.
it.
Yeah, it's Before we touch on that, obviously we've got a couple little news segments. Obviously, both the Shell V Power drivers signed again. They didn't tell us how many years though for, so the contracts probably differ a little bit. You were saying earlier what you thought about that.
Yeah, that's it. I think, no doubt they've offered them at least a couple of years each. I would assume around that, but McLaughlin, we know, like, he's made no secret of it. He wants to move on to NASCAR. He even seen a story that he'd love to have a crack at the Indy 500 as well.
Mm.
So if and when he does move on, I think they'd want to keep Coulthard in the team. So you've got that familiarity with one of the drivers before you bring in a new one. If you had a whole new driver lineup, you could guarantee you're probably not going to have the best season.
Mm.
So I think they'll be looking at Coulthard as a longer term option, and it's hard to argue on re-signing Coulthard because he's raced so much better this year. He's
Yeah,
only the 2 wins, but he's
he's
stacking
been there.
podiums along the way. Yeah, he's kept his teammate a lot more honest this year as opposed to last year. It's just McLaughlin, as we've said 1,000 times already now, he's just been on a different planet this year. So, but yeah, that's good for them. Interesting where that will leave Mostert now as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously he's been linked very heavily with Walkinshaw and Jeddah United, but whether he stays at Tickford or maybe possibly moves and leaves a spot for Caruso or someone there. But Caruso's also been linked with maybe a move back to GRM, so it's gonna all reveal itself at the end of towards Bathurst kind of time.
Yeah, that's it.
So
We'll just be saying the same things over and over again.
Yeah, that's it.
Every podcast if we kept touching on it. Until we know, we won't really know too much.
Yeah. So moving on to best race of the season, I reckon it's kind of weird to watch it from race control because you don't really have the commentary up there. So usually you can't. Well, like you're watching the race and you can see whether there's good battles kind of thing, but you don't have like the director's cut kind of thing. So you're just kind of watching the cars go round kind of deal. So sometimes it could be really boring, but on the broadcast it could actually be interesting. But just from watching like the cars go round like on the massive screen that we have of every corner, I could tell it was a cracker of a race, and it was as they're going down to turn 1 and Reynolds mounted the back of McLaughlin. I'm like, oh, yep, that's gonna be controversial. As soon as that happened,
That's it.
I turned to my friend beside me. I'm like, yep, that's gonna come up lots.
Yeah, that's it. And social media is still going off about it. It was
I haven't had a chance to look that much, but yeah, I assumed it would.
that night. I was just going through some of the comments, and they're crackers. There was a lot that were for McLaughlin, a lot that were against McLaughlin. Same with some for and against Reynolds.
I don't see how you don't just see it as a racing incident, though.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that thought that too. I was on the side of thinking that it was a race incident. Obviously, as we well know, I'm a Ford fan, so I could kick up and say, "Oh, what's Reynolds doing? He's an idiot." Overall, I still think he has to shoulder more of the blame because he is the guy behind it. He's ultimately still responsible for not hitting the car in front.
Yeah.
But McLaughlin, he was off throttle going around turn one. And Reynolds, he kept the boot in. It was a great launch from him.
Yeah.
On the run down to turn two. But it's sort of that old adage in motorsport of like you can't win a race on the first lap, but you can definitely lose it. And I think that's where if he just had pulled back a little bit and thought, all right, let's just get around the first couple of corners. We'll look out for each other. Then we'll go racing. If he had enough car speed, he could have gone on to win that race.
I think he probably wanted to make that move there because he kind of learnt from experience yesterday. If he's in front of McLaughlin, he can hold him back for quite a while. I think that's probably why he was trying to make that move so early on, and especially since he saw that opportunity open up, because you saw as like the wall moves around to the right kind of thing, and it opens up more. It was only like a bike lane width there though, and the bike lanes are tiny in Townsville.
There was barely a car width at best, so it was going to be optimistic. And the other thing was how the hell was he going to pull it up at turn two? Because he was steaming in there, and you were on as inside could be.
Yeah.
I would have no doubt that he probably would have ended up punting someone anyway.
Yeah.
Because I just think he was
there
carrying
would have been
so
more
much
contact.
speed. Yeah, that's it. So I think regardless, like that was actually the lesser of the two incidents he was probably going to have.
Yeah. I think
so. Overall, still a racing incident. You could see that McLaughlin he did start to move to the left, back over towards the racing line, but as soon as he started to do that, he suddenly like, oh, I'll stay here.
Yeah.
Because you coming into the braking zone, like if he had a glance in the mirror and seen Reynolds, he would have been like, oh, he's staying there, I'll stay here. But Reynolds, he was closing in at such a rapid rate of knots that he was never going to be able to stop that move. So
it was interesting because I was, I don't know whether they show it too much in the broadcast, but they have this thing called Hawkeye now, where it's basically like the same kind of thing like football and soccer and all that and tennis, where they can go back through the replays and all that, and they can watch them all through. And it's interesting. They really look at it like frame by frame, like literally like quarters of a second they click through and watch it, and then they had the onboard from, this was during the race, they're like the onboard of Reynolds and the onboard of McLaughlin, and they can time it so it's at the exact same time. So like for universal kind of time, and they click it all through. I wasn't watching too intently because obviously I had a race to run at the same time. But it's so interesting. They really examine it a lot, so like you can't say they're not critical of the incidents, because they pulled that up for like stuff you wouldn't even see on the broadcast, like contact at 13 or something, and someone gains an advantage, and something you won't see on the broadcast. But then like a penalty will come up and you'll be like, oh, what's that for? And it's most likely come through Hawkeye, because Shankin will call it through and then Hawkeye will go through it basically. So
well, especially when it's two of the championship contenders
exactly.
And it's on lap one, they are going to go over that with a fine-tooth comb. And like you see the onboard camera, you don't see it during the broadcast. It's just there for cams and has all the telemetry and on that. So they go through that and they'll see the steering angle and throttle percentage and
they haven't got telemetry
sort
at the
stuff,
time. But they haven't got telemetry, but they've just got the onboards. They can get the telemetry later, obviously, because it's not they don't have a live feed of the team's telemetry, but they get that telemetry off the team later if they want it. And then use Hawkeye with that as well. So that's why the stewards stay there for like 3 or 4 hours after the race.
That's it. I think overall it's still. I was happy to cop that it's a racing incident. Like I remember sitting there before the start of the race because the rain was starting to come down. I just thought to myself, like, this will be the day McLaughlin gets turned around for turn two. I just had one of those days. I thought someone's just going to send one up the inside, touch you, turn him around. It didn't happen exactly that way, but I thought he ended up going backwards anyway. But I still actually think he certainly had the speed. He still ended up having the
Oh,
fastest
he
lap of the
fought
race,
back
but that was
massively.
after the rain came down. But they made a bit of a silly move during the first safety car. Was they filled him up, like they put 100 litres on board, and then he ended up getting lapped by his teammates, which pretty much ends your race day because you can't. Not only do you have a tank full of fuel, you've got to try and pass guys that don't have as much fuel on board for one. And in the wet, it's hard to pass anyway, so it kind of ruined his day. I think they'll definitely trying to get him out in front of the leaders so he could cycle back around, join the end of the train, and he would have been there with heavy fuel. And I've got no doubt that he would have battled his way up into well into the top 10. I don't think he would have made it as far as top 5, but possibly 7th or 8th, which means those extra few vital points. But because of that, he ended up having to stick behind, and he stayed behind like a lap down for much of the race after that, and he was only able to come home 11th in the end.
Also, touching briefly, just because we forgot to talk about it, on the top 10 shootout, Todd Hazelwood put in an awesome performance in the top 10 shootout, coming in 4th, beating out Van Gisbergen and Whincup, who obviously wasn't in the top 10 shootout, but he's running last year's machinery, and he's beating out like the current Holden dealer team, like the current Holden factory team with older spec stuff. And I just I was incredibly impressed with him. Obviously, he dropped down quite a bit in the race. I was watching him during the race, and he was just getting bullied basically off the circuit by a lot of the top guys. Like,
maybe it was the silver paint job on the car. They couldn't see him in the spray, so people were just running into him.
I saw Kelly. Down at 11. Kelly pushed him wide, and then someone behind Kelly pushed him wide again, and he almost ended up in the wall, and he just kept getting bullied off, and he lost like 4 or 5 positions just in that little section there.
That's it.
So he has the pace, clearly, and they have the car. It's just, I don't think he has the racecraft quite yet, but obviously that's okay. He's quite a young driver, but that was an awesome performance by him. When I saw him in the top 10, I'm like, yes, that's awesome to see.
Yeah, that's it. It was definitely a good result for him in the shootout. Like, it was to beat out both the factory Holden boys. You've done a pretty bloody good job. And we've seen during the race you started to slip backwards a little bit, but by no means is that doing any harm to his CV and the potential and trying to find himself a better drive for down the future.
Exactly. So Van Gisbergen took out a very wet race under safety car, unfortunately. But I think it was probably a good decision to finish it under safety car because there was so much going on. A lot of people were saying it was like time certain kind of finish, but like if they had kept going, we would have ended up with more incidents for sure, and more cars out of the race and more damage.
We've seen a guy that never makes mistakes make a mistake in Whincup. He just looped it around. It actually looked very much like Mark Webber's spin at the Korean Grand Prix in similar conditions several years ago when it's ultimately cost him a championship, and that might have been the final nail in the coffin perhaps for Whincup's championship charge this year, maybe. Still a long way to go, but it's a lot of ground to make up now, especially when he was starting to find momentum. Like, he had a really good Saturday, and that was just the top of weekend. It was, if you had a good Saturday, you had a poor Sunday.
Yeah.
If you had a poor Saturday, you ended up having a pretty good Sunday.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those weekends, and Whincup second on Saturday, and then DNF on Sunday.
Yeah, last on Sunday.
Yeah, that's it. I'll strangely, that's probably the best the ZB Commodores look. They were a couple of feet shorter than what it was before that. I felt it actually looks quite good like that, but I think some of the other Ford fans were like, "Oh, please be 97, please be 97." But I think, Whincup, he made the mistake. He rarely makes them. So he can be, he'll kick himself hard enough. I don't think anybody else needs to drill him too hard about it. Like, it's the first time I've seen him crash out of a race, and I don't know how long.
Yeah.
But clearly the car had pace because Van Gisbergen, like, he's awesome in the wet. There's no denying that. He's probably the best wet weather runner that we have. And he was able to make his way through the field and win the race. Waters was surprising though. He was he was fast early on. Like he was pulling away the better part of a second lap for quite a long time there. So he was just pulling out a massive gap. And he ultimately though, as it like started to dry out, it got better. Or he started to come backwards a bit. Then when it got wetter, he was doing better again. And then I think once it went on to wet tyres, that's where he actually started to lose a little bit more pace.
Yeah, it was. The other guys just caught him when as it started to dry out. I was also pretty impressed by Mostert. He made up quite a few positions, made up 11, as well as Golding and Caruso. A lot of people made up a lot of positions, mostly just because there was incidents all over the joint. Obviously, biggest one was that fire in the pit lane during the second safety car for the fire at turn 10. So there was 2 fires going at the same time. It ended up, the one at 10 ended up going out by itself. Well, like it ignited underneath it, and then it was just kind of smoking. The fire crews were on that pretty well. I think, Jacobson jumped out of the car pretty quickly.
It was a lot of flame for an engine failure, though. I think they said it was an oil fire and that, but normally you just see a lot of smoke. And,
like a puff of smoke kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it. And then it just quietly pulls up, and the driver gets out and kicks the gravel, and then he walks off in a huff. But this time around, like, it was like a big flash of flame, and it was like, wow, like you don't normally see that one. Like, back in
I think it must have been oil then, surely.
Yeah, back in the old B10 days of F1, you used to see a bit of flame every now and again.
Yeah.
Like you'd usually see the big telltale sudden plume of smoke, and then if they got off the throttle, then you'd occasionally get flame out the back as well. But that was definitely a different one, but certainly not the biggest amount of flame that we've seen, because that was left for the pit lane.
Yeah.
So full credit, I think it's got to go to all of the fire marshals that were down there, and the pit crews of other teams that chipped in immediately to help, and because everyone was concentrating on the fire on the ground. I think Greg Murphy brought it up in the wake. He was standing right near it when it happened, and it was like, Nick Percat's car's still on fire, and then the Red Bull and the Shell guys went down to help put that out. And credit to them too. They had the obviously they get a lot of training. They didn't just pop the boot open, because there was a shot where you could still see the flames all licking around the edge of the boot. Like obviously a lot of the fuel had gone down into the boot.
Yeah.
So they left that closed and just sprayed all around it and suffocated it that way, rather than open it up and suddenly a big whoosh of fresh oxygen to fan the flames. So it was a scary incident, no doubt. I still haven't read anything on exactly how it happened. It looked like purely the valve that stops the fuel flowing failed or broke or something, because it was pouring out at the looked like the same sort of rate that
came unattached from it.
So it was something broken. It was still flowing as fast as what it would filling up the car. Like so, and it was only for that couple of seconds. The guy that's on the kill switch for the fuel was probably a little bit late on the uptake, I think maybe, but. It was a lot of fuel that suddenly ended up on the ground as soon as Percat took off. Then suddenly, whoosh, there goes the flame.
It was really lucky that it didn't spread into the pit lane, considering the hose kind of went backwards. It was lucky it didn't flick backwards into the actual pit boxes there.
Yeah,
then that would have been like Barcelona 2012, was it? Where they had a massive fire in the pit lane and during F1.
Yeah, there was one, I think 2012, it was after the race the car caught fire. But you had Jos Verstappen's from many, many years ago, I think Germany 94, I think that was, where that just engulfed the whole car. And there were mechanics rolling around on the ground because they were covered in fuel. I was surprised that didn't happen here. No doubt the refueler himself would have got a bit on him, but was able to get back quickly enough to stay out and not get set on fire. But there was enough around that I thought that it could have been one of those ones where we start to see a lot of mechanics need the attention more than anything because their overalls are on fire.
Yeah, it's just very lucky it wasn't a lot worse than that. But obviously after that ended under safety car, it was very sudden. It was like the lap after the fueling incident. They we're calling this under safety car. I think they would have gone to the end if not for that fuel incident, but that just made so much mess of the pit lane. They probably
Yeah.
it was more the reasoning, just like probably like if there's someone else with an incident, there's still potential for another fire here because they haven't obviously covered all of it just yet because it's hard. So they thought if we're gonna release them again, and there's obviously gonna be more incidents, and someone comes through the pit lane and then just catch on fire again. So I think it was a good call by them. Obviously, some people disagree with that, but I thought it was a good call.
Yeah, like you can understand. It's a shame we didn't see more racing because it was so entertaining up until that point. So yeah, I would love to have seen them go green again, and me being the Ford man wanted to see one of the two guys behind have a crack at Van Gisbergen, but you got to put the safety of I think in this case mainly the pit crews. Like you still had so much of that those powder extinguishers, like so much of that powder all over the ground still. Like that. Once you get a bit of water in that'll become slippery. You just have to put their safety first, and not only that, like they've emptied all of these extinguishers.
Exactly.
So they would have to restock really quick, get a couple more. No doubt they've got more than one.
Yeah.
But like there was just that much chaos and confusion. There wasn't that many laps to go. Let's just put it out of its misery. We'll work out who the winner is, and then then we'll move on to the next one. So I think it was the smarter call, as disappointing as it is. We all want to see it finish under green flag, as it's what you want to do. But I don't think too much else was going to happen. I think it would have been hard for anyone to catch Van Gisbergen anyway. So I don't think we would have seen too much more. Maybe just a few more mistakes in those last couple of laps. That would have been it, though.
Yeah, it's it would have been difficult to pass under wet, considering they'd have to Coulthard would have had to go down the inside basically because it was starting to dry up towards the end there because the rain had stopped, but there was still obviously wet offline because there was starting to be a dry line on the inside. But I think as soon as you go into that wet stuff, you would have just locked and gone straight ahead. Some of the overhead shots during the race, you could just see in the water that was like offline, it just looked like a rainbow of color because of all the oil that was on the circuit there.
Yeah.
Especially coming around, there was a shot towards the end there before the last safety car coming around turn 10 on the inside at the exit of 10, like at the passing opportunity at 11. It was just oil all the way down there. So if anyone had tried to go down the inside there, you would have just gone straight into the runoff basically.
Yeah, exactly, and like we've seen that all race. Like it was so many drivers just slid wide because they'll push each other. Like it was usually when they were line astern, and the guy in front, in an effort to try and stay on the brakes late, would lock up, and the guy behind just locked up in sympathy and went off as well. So we've seen those ones a couple of times as well. But yeah, like it was. Well, Saturday was the best race of the year. Sunday overtook it immediately. So I don't think anyone can complain about the weekend that we had. Like we had, two different winners. Holden's back on the top step, for the second time this year. Whether or not it's complete genuine pace that we've seen from Triple Eight, because it's definitely been a circuit that they've dominated over the years. Like they've won like half of the races between the Triple Eight drivers. So. Whether that's a bit more circuit dependent, that's where they're going to get a good result. Obviously, the weather equalises all anyway.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not sure where we're at for Triple Eight yet. It was good to see them bounce back for one weekend, but whether we see that in Ipswich and into the future, we'll wait and see.
So on to our top three from the weekend. I'm going with Michael Caruso. Despite the fact he did come 22nd in the first race, he had an awesome fight back in the second race, coming 9th. In a car that seemed to have struggled. Obviously, I've touched on it earlier, but yeah, I'm going Michael Caruso for my 1 point. For my 2 points, it's close. It'd probably go Mostert, to be honest. He was probably goes second best performer. He did get the third on the Saturday. Obviously disappointing to not see him fighting right up for this first position. And he came up 11 positions on the Sunday, so really awesome to see. For my first would be Van Gisbergen. Despite the fact he did get outperformed by Whincup on the Saturday, he drove really well on the Sunday in pretty challenging conditions, I think. It would be interesting, obviously, we've said it before, it would be interesting to see whether Coulthard would have actually got past him. But yeah, he defended well and he kept his head cool and he was able to get that win on quite a tough day.
Yeah, that's right. For mine, it was almost a case of no one wanted to get the 3 points across the weekend. So, like I said, the top performers on the Saturday all had not so good Sundays. So, on Saturday, I would have gone McLaughlin, Whincup, and then Fabian Coulthard because Fab's having a much stronger run through the field. But then we've seen McLaughlin get involved in the incident again. I don't think he was totally blame free, but I think majority wasn't his fault. So, but it was a good recovery drive. Whincup again, he crashed out, so that's obviously going to take you out of the running. But eventually, in the end, all I could settle on was my 1 point. I'd give it going with Golding because he come through the field, he kept his nose clean, and he managed to finish in 7th, which is I think his best career result up to now, and a car that clearly hasn't been as competitive as they would have liked this year. So you beat your teammate home, even though it was his one and only outing for the team so far. So it's you've done what you needed to do. I think he's you got a 7-time champion in Whincup who put it in the wall. He didn't, and come home 7th. So that was a great result for him. And then in my 2 points ends up going to Fabian Coulthard. Again, mainly similar reasons for you and lost it was that he kept it out of the walls on both the days, and had pretty poor qualifying on Saturday, but managed to come up through the field as you would expect him to do in a quick car, and come home in 5th. And then on Sunday he just had a pretty clean race altogether. It was one of those days where any little mistake could have ended your race, as we've touched on again, seen that with Whincup. So he's done well to come home in 2nd, so he gets the 2 points, and then the third is with 3 points is Van Gisbergen. So it's kind of strange. He's either scored no points or he's got all of the points for me. So it was definitely just a cracking race from him. He's the best in the wet. We've seen that over and over again, particularly when it is just a little bit greasy as well. But once he got the lead, you knew it was going to be pretty hard for anybody else to catch him. So he gets the 3 points for me this weekend.
So next event is obviously at Ipswich, the paperclip. Obviously, we've had back in 2003 we had some very dramatic rollovers there, but they fixed that curb now, thankfully.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my only memory really from Queensland race. So
there hasn't been too many awesome moments. It's never tossed up the most exciting race.
I think the 03 rollover is what a lot of people remember from Queensland Raceway.
That's it. Yeah.
It produces good enough racing. I think obviously that's why it stayed on the calendar. If it was super boring, it would be gone. But there's that passing opportunity down into the hairpin. That's the first hairpin. Yeah. Just trying to remember what the layout is. And then the last corner as well is obviously a decent passing opportunity.
You still actually see a bit into turn 1 as well. Especially if you've got better tyres, you can get a much better exit out of turn 6, get the run into turn 1 and sweep through.
I was talking to someone who's actually driven Queensland Raceway before, and they said, despite the fact that it looks not as exciting on TV, it's actually a very challenging circuit for the drivers to go around. They said the times can be really close, but it's very difficult to gain that 0.1 of a second or whatever, because it's once you've got that lap around, you can't go much faster than that. It's very difficult because you really, really have to push the edge. So I think we might see some mistakes in qualifying or qualifying simulations in the practice. Obviously, turn 1 is renowned for that, and also turn 3 because they're the really hard braking zones. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, that's it. It's yeah. Okay. As we said, it doesn't throw up the most exciting racing year on year, but yeah, the drivers always say that it is still quite a tough little track to set up for because you've got turn 1 and 2 that very fast sweeping right hand corners, and it can be bumpy on the entry. You've seen on in different years it can be quite bumpy through there. You've only got to just go wide. There's no there's no artificial grass exit on the
Unlike
on the
F1.
exit of the corner. Yeah, that's it. So if you go wide, you're in the dirt, and you'll just keep going along the dirt until you can get the speed off the car.
Yeah.
And then we've got you got to turn 3 a hairpin, the best overtaking opportunity on the track. Then you got 2 medium left-handers that don't. It's not really a passing opportunity. You can often see them get a good exit out. They'll get the shuttle exit out of 3, but then you're on the wrong side for turn 4, so you usually get the door closed on you there. And then turn 5 turn 6 another hairpin. So very simple track to look at, but it is one that they always say is tough to set up for, and hopefully we see an exciting race this year. I don't think there's going to be too much change at the top. I think Triple Eight may carry on with their form of late, but I think Triple Eight will be still DJR will still be the short price favourites.
Also, there's going to be minor center of gravity changes again. Yeah. It's never going to end, basically, this entire season.
That's it. It's
for the Mustang. So, yeah, the fourth time they're going. Fourth time lucky, which isn't a saying at all, but, they're going for it anyway.
Well, we might be up to, 87th time lucky by this time next year. You never know. But, yeah, I'm not as upset by this one as what we had seen by earlier ones. This one's it affects all 3 cars, and it's basically just the lowering of the center of gravity by the same amount for all 3 makes a car. So it's no one should be advantaged or disadvantaged either way by it. Like the Commodore gets to go back down to where it was at the start of the season. The Mustang gets to put the equivalent amount of weight back on the floor. I think I read they're going to a steel roof though, so they'll be losing the composite panel roof and going back to a steel one. I think that might be, to me, it sounds more of a ploy from Ford that they'll still be that same weight up the top, but it might be slightly better balance or something like that. It might make the car a little bit more rigid. So
it's probably better than putting weights up there like ballast. It's probably better for them.
Yeah, and I think just because it was 27 kilos or something like that they had to move to the top. That's a lot of weight to put into. They would have been moving it around. Yeah, that's right. You're looking at trying to carry a couple of cartons of beer for that amount.
That's a good equivalent.
That's it. So it was. Yeah, so it's a lot of weight to try and put up on the roof. So I think by having a metal roof, it takes away having to put as much up there. It's going to be the same weight. I don't know if that was just my way of thinking, was that maybe they've found a stinky way to make the car a bit more rigid, so it's going to be a bit better through the corners, or just have a slightly better weight distribution on the top, so it's not going to be such an impact for them. I'm not too sure. That was the only way I could think about it, of why they'll go for that. But Nissan, because they've always had the lighter engine out of those 3 manufacturers, they've had to carry a weight penalty underneath the bonnet for all of this time. And so they've allowed them to take some of that away and bring it all back down. So it was an idea that was brought up when they made the first center of gravity changes, was that Nissan were having a center of gravity or penalty effectively by having to carry that extra weight. So it was brought up then, why don't they just take that away and let them even it up a bit that way and make whatever adjustment they need to after that. So I think effectively they've just made it that now, but again, social media lit up as it's always going to. Looking through a lot of the comments, it was mostly people that hadn't read the story. So,
exactly.
They see the headline and blow up immediately. This is the worst thing that Supercars has ever done. I've never seen a season like it, though. It is getting a little bit beyond the joke that we've had 4 changes now.
I think that in previous seasons this has been occurring. They just didn't let us know about it. I think they've made the
Yeah,
mistake of actually telling us this.
maybe, but I don't think it was to. Like if they made adjustments, it was very minor adjustments and probably not
Exactly.
anything worth really reporting on. It would have been because everyone considered the cars to be even. Like no one's thought that one car's had just such an advantage over the rest. If they'd said that, oh, there's a slight center of gravity adjustment to the Falcon or to the Commodore or to the Nissan or Mercedes or Volvo, whatever it was going to be, look, it might have been half a kilo because they were all sedans back in the day, and now you see one sedan, one 5-door hatchback, and one 2-door coupe. So I think that's where a lot of the row is coming from. Is that we've got particularly the two quick cars and the Commodore and the Mustang. They're two completely different cars. And the Nissan's still trying to do its best. We might see Nissan be a little bit more competitive, but
Especially with Heimgartner.
yeah, that's it. So we might see them creep up the grid a bit more, but I think given that the Mustang and the Commodore have been able to drop their center of gravity by the same amount, I don't think it's going to change too much at the front. So, again, a couple of the comments were like, oh, so the Commodore gets to go back to where it was last year and the Mustang still got... No, it's all been brought back down. Stress less. I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact. The same when they made the first one, I blew up about it a lot then. It didn't really change a hell of a lot then. Even no one mentions the aero adjustment that was made to the... But it's because you just got this pattern now. We went 2 rounds before they changed the center of gravity going into Tasmania. Then they went, Tasmania and Phillip Island before they clipped the wings of the Mustang. Then we went another 2 rounds before Holden suddenly made a couple of changes to its car. Then we went one more race before we now have another center of gravity adjustment. So I think it's just the supercars fans are just frustrated that we're having so many of these changes through the years. Minor as a couple of them might be, it's still another adjustment, and it's especially when they weren't exactly clickbaity articles when you jumped on it, told you exactly what was happening. It was a genuine story, but I think supercars, they need to get their act into gear. Like it was something that we talked about earlier on in the year when they made a couple of these changes, was that they, I put it that they try to shoot the Mustang after versus trying to keep the gate closed. Like after the horse had bolted, they just shot the horse instead of just keeping the gate closed to begin with. So it was, I think supercars are still to blame that they let it get this far. It probably shouldn't have been as big an issue to begin with if they had much tighter parity rules. They didn't. They're trying to make up for it now. I think they've almost... You can see why fans are so disgruntled, because we're seeing all of these changes like every couple of races, and they're just over it. They just want it to just send the boys out, go racing, let them figure it out. The last couple of rounds have been great. It's been really good close racing. So does there need to be an adjustment? Maybe not. But could that have waited to the end of the year? Probably. So by just putting all these extra changes on there,
made the Nissan
doesn't
fans
always
happy.
make sense. Yeah, well, that's it. The Nissan fans might be a little bit happier, and I think the bit that outraged Ford fans was that Roland Dane come out and said that it makes just good sense for supercars, and you see that article and you're like, oh, of course he's behind it, but you don't know this whole story. You got Ryan's story that's on the same committee as well, so he's obviously agreed to it. Anything that can help put a bit of advantage back into where the Mustang was in those first couple of rounds, they're probably going to want to take as well. So I don't think there's too much to read into it. We don't need to panic as hard as what we all are.
Yeah, that's true. So that just about wraps us up for today. Thank you very much for joining me, Shane.
No worries, mate. We'll do this again soon.
Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.